This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Good morning once again, and if you're joining us here, this is our special coverage of Budget 2026-2027. This is a Situation Room. Dennis Aseto and Ndroko here with you. It's doing it a little bit different this morning, where we simulcast with KTN as we get in depth in terms of what is going to happen over the next 1 year as concerns the country's finances, where you're going to get the money from, how you're going to spend it, and what those numbers look like. So we're getting into the second hour of conversations this morning. And as we do that, we will get a little bit deep into it as two guests join us this morning. Dr. XN Iraqi is an economist, joins us this morning. Dr. good morning.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
I am in the World Cup mood.
You're in the World Cup mood?
So when we see you in the US.
Well, let's get through those numbers first of all. Who gave you the visa? Might be another question that we want to ask.
After the broadcast.
After the broadcast, we'll get into those details. Okay. Abraham Rogo is the Executive Director of Budgeti Hub, and he's also here with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Okay. How are you feeling about the numbers so far? I don't know if I want to ask that question because you might not finish. But
yeah. So first of all, the numbers have been shifting, have been changing. When you look at from the time we had the budget policy statement in February, and now the numbers have been going up, have been shifting. And the interesting piece of that is, of course, you see the shifts in the expenditure, you see the, so that has made me a bit uneasy, particularly because there are things that seem not to be adding up.
Okay.
But we can talk more about that. Yeah, so I'm a bit uneasy.
A little bit uneasy?
A bit uneasy.
Well, Dennis went to the Guinea.
Yes.
And he's got a proverb from the Guineans.
The Guineans.
So we'd love your interpretation of that.
So the Guineans, first of all, have bauxite. Bauxite is a critical mineral that is being used to in the process of manufacturing aluminium. So, Prof, if you go to America, don't say aluminium, say aluminum. Aluminum, yes.
I normally, when I go there, I always talk with the southern rule.
Oh, there you go.
I spend some time in the deep south.
Okay.
So you may even need an interpreter to get what I'm saying.
Yeah, but the proverb that we get today from the Guineans, the river never drinks its own water, and the tree never eats its own fruit. Prof, how would you interpret it?
It just tells us that we are supposed to serve other people. So if you're a river, the water is supposed to be taken by animals, by trees, and so on. If you're a tree, you're supposed to be eaten by human beings, turned into charcoal, and so on. I think the proverb is about service, not being served. But I'm also a bit concerned about your proverbs because I've been coming here for years.
Yeah.
And I've not heard you guys giving me a proverb from Kiambu or from Karachunyu or from Machakos.
It is coming.
It's coming.
It's in the pipeline.
Thank you.
Yes. Google, how would you interpret it?
Yeah, I understand the same. Really, that our lives exist for the benefit of others. Yeah. So there's a lot that we do thinking we are doing it for ourselves, but in reality, it actually serves other people. And the more we are conscious that we actually exist, a big part of our being, whether it's being healthy, just that act of staying healthy, for instance, serves your family's peace. Yeah, so I think we exist for the benefit and for the blessing of others.
I can say that again because the act of staying healthy will equally go into the finance bill and look at what has been allocated to the health sector.
Indeed. Okay, great interpretations. Let's look into these numbers because the second second Thursday, every June, the budget will be read. It's interestingly because this happens across East Africa, happens in Uganda, happens in Tanzania. So everybody's going to get before their respective parliaments and read the budget. If you look at Kenya, we already know what the numbers are looking like, 4.82 trillion shillings, highest ever. But a good chunk of that is 1.1 trillion shillings, which, if we're not speaking economic language, we don't know where we're going to get it from. And what has been attached at the end of that is debt. It's going to be from debt. You will have to borrow that money. Also, a great responsibility has been placed on the shoulders of KRA to then be able to collect some of that money to the tune of 3.8 trillion. So we're going to play around with those numbers this morning and try to figure out in this conversation, where is this money going to come from? The finance bill is what tells us where the money will come from. The appropriations bill says how you're going to spend it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about where the money is going to come from.
Good.
Based on what KRA has been able to do in this fiscal year that's coming to an end. We'll start with you, Dr. Rugo.
Yes, thank you.
Where's 4.8 trillion shillings going to come from?
Good. Thank you very much. So let me start by saying that the statement today is a highlight of statement of the budget. The budget was submitted in Parliament on 30th of April, and all the necessary documentation. And for clarity, the Parliament website and the Treasury website has all those documents for any Kenyan who would like to look at them. Where does the money come from? So our budget is financed largely from three sources. And the first source, of course, is what we call ordinary revenue, tax. So that's going to be the biggest portion. That direct tax is where income tax, VAT, value-added tax, import duty, and then excise duty. So that's normally the biggest portion, and of that, income tax, both corporate income tax and personal income tax, is big. And those are the large pieces that KRA, Kenya Revenue Authority, is responsible for collecting. Then the second part of financing is what we call non-tax revenue, or in the language of budgets, appropriation in aid. So appropriation in aid is all the charges, levies, and rates that are paid for services rendered by government. So let me give you an example. You go to NTSA, you need a new driving license, you pay something. You are transferring land from myself to Prof, I pay something. All those monies that are collected by...
That was happening.
Knock on wood.
Prof, I may just gift you now that you can't make it to the US. So in this particular budget, you're talking about 2.985 trillion coming from the ordinary revenue. You're talking about another 660 coming from the appropriations in aid. Now, then the third part is if the two, you will have other grants and donations, but they're normally a very small portion. Like this year we're talking about less than 50 billion. The last portion is when you have a deficit between your expenditure and your revenue of those two pieces, then the difference is what you borrow. So those two first figures are 3.6. We're expecting 3,000. For his use of words, allow me just to use simpler figures. Our budget is around 4,800 Kenya shillings. Those two figures I've talked about is 3,600. Okay. And therefore we have about 1,200, which is the deficit, which is what now you borrow. And if, when you less the donations and the grants, then you will come to about 1.1. So that's how the budget is going to, is planning to be. But it's an important thing I need to say at this particular point. The fact that you have about 660 billion or 660, from my number, 660 shillings that you are charging on different services, yet Kenyans have already paid taxes up front for those very services, means that the cost of accessing public services is actually going up. And the interesting thing that we notice is that that appropriation in aid is what actually has been rising fastest. It's the income stream for government that is growing fastest. Income tax is actually declining.
Well, what's an example of a tax that Kenyans have paid up front for which the budget is looking for an extra charge?
Let me give you an example. So for instance, when you pay for, when you have already paid, so you've paid your income tax, government has already collected money to provide a service called environmental protection, for instance. But when you go to set up your business, you'll have to pay a permit to NEMA.
Okay.
And several of them. There's also tax for transport and transport regulation. But when you go to NTSA, you'll pay for that service. So basically, it means that the more, and it's common to charge across the world, but the more these charges, remember even the ID, the immigration department, whether you're thinking about your passport, whether you're thinking about your renewal of the ID, whether you're thinking about all these, that package of these extra non-tax measures, and then when you come to the county level, for instance, you add permits, business permits, and what have you, is what actually complicates the cost of doing business, is what actually increases the cost of living, you know, because you go to, for instance, your charges for, you bought your car. When you bought that car, you paid import duty.
Yes.
Then when you go to buy fuel, you pay for the price of bringing that fuel. But you have other rates in there that are not taxes. You have, forex adjustment levy, you have petroleum levy, you have railway development levy. When you look at all those levies, are the ones that increase the pump price. And you have also paid VAT on it. So you see what I'm saying? That there are these other extra charges which, where the more they grow, as long as they are the ones growing more, remember they are enforceable. Because if you don't pay a fee to NEMA, they will come for you.
Yeah.
If you don't pay your driving license, they will come for you. The police will be there waiting for you on the road, you know, and the like. When you pay for your insurance, you'll pay for excise duty, but you'll also pay for when you pay your bills at the hotel, you'll pay for VAT for that service, but you'll also pay catering levy and tourism development levy.
Yes.
Those are the ones I'm talking about. So, and that has been the portion that has been growing fastest, which would explain, just my last point, why the cost of living is going up. Because the cost of doing business is going up in and of itself.
Which then, yes, just
Yeah, so no, that's the last point I wanted to make.
Yeah, so Prof, then if we look at all these levies that are growing really fast, making it the cost of living to go high, cost of doing business to go high, one asks the question then, if cost of doing business is high, that means you're closing doors for would-be investors to set up business in the country, or already existing investors would have to restructure their businesses and let people go for them to be able to operate in the country. So with that then, through the new levies, through the new taxes that we see are being introduced, is the government then shooting itself on the leg? Because the number of people that you would be getting taxes from is going down.
Already we can see evidence of that. So anytime you talk about the budget, I always tell Kenyans, read the budget speech in conjunction with the economic survey that is released a few months before. Because they give you the state of the economy. So if you look at the state of the economy last year, the GDP or the economy declined. The growth rate declined from 4.7, 4.6. And that confirms what he is, or what he said, and what you're asking, that we don't have people investing, we don't have people consuming because of that. When I come to invest in a country, whether I'm a Kenyan or a foreigner, I want to make money. So if I see I'm not going to make money, I'll leave and go to neighboring countries, alternative countries. And if I'm already in the country, I could, instead of expanding by business, take money to TB, that money to TBs or buy boats, so that I don't need to be disturbed by anybody. But let me go back to what he raised, a very important issue about levies. Why is the government focusing on levies? Remember in 2024, we demonstrated on the streets against taxes. So the government is very clever and realized you don't want taxes, you don't want to pay taxes or more taxes, let's shift to levies. So levies are very easy to institute, and that's why the government is taking that side. Kenyans also don't want the government to incur debt. They don't want you to borrow. People are saying the government should not borrow from China and elsewhere. So the easy play, the low-hanging fruit happen to be levies. And that's why we are being loaded with very many levies. So eroding levies on Kenyans is an easier option, but it has long-term consequences. What you have said, that businesses are not expanding, people are not investing, and if you go to downtown Nairobi today, or you go to where we have informal sector, people are really suffering. Because those levies don't discriminate, everybody pays them.
Yeah.
And as I've always argued that money in our pockets is more prudently utilized than money in the government. So that is the problem we are facing. And the other thing you need to remember, and my friend should have mentioned that, is apart from levies, the government doesn't want to borrow, doesn't want you to put more taxes. That's why the government is moving towards PPP projects, private-public partnership projects. It's also moving towards securitization. But what we should be discussing at this forum is not so much how to raise the money, how to spend it. It should be how do we accelerate the economic growth. Because that is a secret weapon in our quest to make this country more economically productive.
And how do we accelerate economic growth? Yes.
Economic growth is always is not driven by the government, it's driven by you and me. So anybody who is producing in this country, whether you are particular entrepreneurs, particularly investors, we should give them incentives in the budget. So that if I have a small business employing 5 people, I can employ 20 people. If I have a business that is covering 1 county, it can cover 20, 30 counties. The biggest problem in the country today is unemployment. And you cannot now road businesses with levies and levies. They close, then you have no businesses. Yeah. And the problem of closing businesses or not attracting investors, you actually get less taxes. And that's what he said, that if you look at taxes going down, that's why you're focusing on levies. So we should strike a balance. Because at the end of the day, I want economic growth. 10% is my target.
Yeah. So let me just add to that, the way to make sure the economy grows is make sure that money is circulating in the pockets of people. Because for an economy to grow, you need to up production, but you also need to up consumption. The things I have just explained, including now with heightened crisis, and the Strait of Hormuz now, Iran says it's permanently now closed, as of yesterday, as of this morning rather, is that all this, when so much money is not circulating, it means that there is nobody to consume goods and services. When the things I have just talked about and Prof has added in terms of the cost of living, in terms of the cost of goods, it means 2 things. One, because incomes are not improving. From 2020, real incomes have actually been going down. And I dare anybody to just look at their own salaries, and look at how much you could afford in 2019 and what you can afford today, and factoring in inflation. And you see, the discussion that inflation, which is now going up, by the way, inflation has started going up again. Inflation is the increase in the cost of basic goods, how they're expanding. The fact that they expanded at 4% last year does not mean they did not expand. They only expanded with a smaller margin than 8%, than 9% where they were. So which means year on year, the cost of accessing basic goods and services and food is going up. Last year it went up, but by a smaller margin, but it's still going up, it's still compounding. But salaries and real incomes are not going up. And therefore what that means is that the money within the economy is not circulating. But let me come to public debt. And Prof, if you allow me, I would still put public participation, I work a lot on that. Public-private partnerships and securitization, they all need to be part of debt. As of now, they are not considered as part of debt stock.
Why?
Add pending bills.
I'm coming to that.
One would imagine that the debt is described as something that's owed.
As of now, the reason for that is, and that's why there's an argument that they are not part of debt. But remember, every public-private partnership is guaranteed by government. The private investor will not go at a loss. If today Kenyans decided none of them will use the expressway, the one who built the expressway will not lose their money. Turkana wind project, we've not consumed a lot of the power from there. True. But we are still paying. So the SGR, it's not once, it's not twice we have put in money. So the investor will never lose. So I consider it part of debt, and I'm pushing that needs to be included as part of the total debt stock. All the guarantees to the state corporations, the same ones that actually charge. But let me finish my thought process. That because of all these demands of government, and I'm still not convinced that government does not want to borrow more, because when you look at it right now, we are talking about 1.1 trillion or 1,100 of deficit that needs to be borrowed. But that is a figure as of now. Last year, let me give you an example. Last year we started with 900. We are ending the financial year at 1,100. The deficit has increased. Borrowing domestically is going to be now 90%. 90% of this 1.1, about 950 billion, is going to be borrowed domestically. What does that mean? Because I want to add it why the economy is not growing. It means that government is actually competing and out-competing, out-maneuvering everybody else in the domestic credit market. But the interesting thing is that now it's accessing credit at a cheaper rate. So when the CBR comes down, government will access it at 10%, because the CBR now is 8.7. It was retained at 8.75% by the monitoring policy committee yesterday, the day before yesterday. But for you go try to take a loan for your company or for you as an individual, the banks will shoot you at 17%.
But we know already that for any economy-facing government, that this domestic borrowing should actually be saved for MSMEs, those who are building. They are the ones who actually build an economy.
Precisely.
So when we look at a budget being built, should we not be leaving that money towards the infrastructure and manufacturing that the Cabinet Secretary will mention today? Should that money not be ring-fenced for the actual economy builders in any budget?
Precisely. And unfortunately, the sectors that you see there is not much growth in terms of investment is actually manufacturing. Our contribution, manufacturing as a contribution to the GDP, and we can check in the economic survey, it's important that Prof raised it up, is actually not growing. Yet that is where the productive sector, where you actually can employ, because Kenya, as it is, we are still going to depend on human labor. It is the only way to get people out of poverty. When you are talking about 40% poverty rate, when you're talking about 7 out of every 10 between 15 and 35 are out of work, the only way to get that moving is to make sure they have work.
Yes.
And the investment, you're right, it should be in ensuring that MSMEs have loans. You know, when you look at, for instance, the total money that is being said is being given to the youth, it's just about 15 billion shillings.
Right.
Whether you think about Nyota, you think about, the report, but they're just about 15 billion or thereabout. That's a very small amount when you think about the millions you are thinking. Yet, employment will not be created by giving money to Aseto. Employment will be created by ensuring there are industries that can absorb Aseto and 20 others, and 30 others, and across different value chains. And I keep asking, where did the value chains go? The 7 of them, the Kenya Kwanza, So, because if you don't attack it from all these different angles, it becomes a thing of Nyota, gather people in a public stadia, give them 25,000, half of it they go to buy phones or whatever, treat themselves, and they, in the argument of if my money cannot solve my problems, I better eat it, and then at the end of the day, you cannot show what businesses have been established. And assuming the businesses are established, you still need a consumption chain that actually can demand these services. So right now, demand is actually suppressed.
Yeah. Now, Prof, we know credit is the lifeline of any MSME or any investor out there. And when you look at even whatever government wants to borrow over 900 billion shillings locally, that would mean that, first of all, the question is, when we borrow locally, is the interest rate higher as compared to when we borrow externally?
It's usually higher. It's usually higher when you borrow locally.
Locally, that means
and that's why there was a
local debt is expensive.
It's expensive. Yes.
It's expensive.
That's why everybody wanted to go to Euro boards and so on, where the interest rate was lower.
Yes. So with that in mind, then we look at a situation where the government wants to expand its tax base, but then again, it is as well borrowing locally that is blocking the expansion of the same. We look at the already existing debt that has not been included, where even IMF today is saying, please go back and fix your books before you come back so that we can talk about the actual debt that does exist. So in terms of funding this budget, right, with everything else that is there and economic experts that have spoken, including the government experts, why is it seemingly difficult to just do what one would say is basic of economics if you want to get more?
Rephrase your question.
Why is it seemingly that the government then, with everything that does exist, does not want to do that which is considered to be basics of economics? Don't borrow locally.
It is all politics. Let me give you a background before I answer your question. If you look at the current budget estimates, we have 4.8 trillion. Only 840 of that money is good development. Why is the rest of the money going? Current expenditure.
Current expenditures.
So if you want to do what you are saying, you need to reduce the recurrent expenditure. That would mean giving counties less money. You know the political consequences. having less government employees, you know what are the consequences, particularly with 2027 in mind. So I think every person, every politician, every leader knows the correct economics, but politics crowd that. For example, you are saying that local debt is very expensive. Everybody knows that.
Yes.
So what is the alternative to debt? We can borrow.
Yes.
But Kenyans don't want to borrow. So as a politician, you always play safe. And that's why you find a lot of political decisions that do not make economic sense, but they make political sense. And what I'm looking for are politicians who are very bold. They'll say, this does not make political sense. Even if it means me losing presidency or losing my parliamentary seat next year, but I make sure that things in this country are right, I will do that. But we have politicians who are that bold. We don't. So we need to such bold politicians. Now, before I finish, let me go back to a very important question he asked and he addressed, economic growth. One of the ways to make economic growth is to make sure that people are optimistic. They will consume more, they will invest more. But I'm concerned by the level of pessimism in this country. Get into a tax, just get into a tax and get into a conversation with the tax driver. Go to the Komba or the SMEs, informal sector, and talk to those people. They are very pessimistic. Yeah. Talk to the businessmen, they are very, very pessimistic. So I think the government needs, in addition to improving the infrastructure, in addition to making sure that there are less levies and the cost of living goes down, we need to be made more optimistic. But very important, if you want the economy to grow, let the people who can multiply that money get it. The SMEs, small businesses, and business people. Because the government does not do any business. That's what we need to remember. Business, investing, entrepreneurship is by all of us. And those are the people who should be getting money. So when the government now starts competing with SMEs and businesses and industries to get money from banks, we are not doing the right thing. Finally, again, I always remind you, read the economic survey. Because one of the things that surprised me about that economic survey, surprisingly, is the amount of liquidity in banks. Surprisingly. Because people don't want to borrow. Why? The economy is not performing very well. Why should I borrow that money? And that's why optimism is very important. Yeah. Why the economy did so well during Kibaki era is that he never did any magic. He just made us feel good and optimistic about tomorrow. So we borrowed. You remember banks having kiosks on the streets?
Oh, yes, they would come to...
Because we are very, very optimistic. Yeah. So that is what politicians are supposed to do, make us optimistic about tomorrow. We shall borrow, we shall invest, and the economy will grow.
Obviously, we know what the law says constitutionally, where Kenya can draw the lines in terms of borrowing and what it's supposed to be for. So I'm a bit concerned, and maybe it's from a lack of knowledge point of view. Rogo, if we say that 1.1 trillion must be borrowed after the grants and all of those things are taken into consideration, and we know that about 900 billion of that will come from the domestic market, which is a more expensive loan, because the external loans are coming at about 2-3%. Can you trace where the 900 billion shillings will actually go?
Good question. So that's where now that's where it gets very complicated, because a lot of our local borrowing is going to finance our normal running of government. It's not going to any specific project. That's a fact. We borrow to refinance. So we issue a T-bill and refinance a bond. We issue a T-bill, transfer money to counties. I suspect even sometimes, and the reason why I say that is because when you do the math and look at the expenditure, you look at just quick math. So you have about 2,800, in terms of expenditure. When you look at the entirety of our must pay, we are talking about 1.5. But the fact is that when you add redemptions, it's actually 2.5. About 2,500. If you add counties, it's 420. Already, you add 5720. Thereabout. You already past 5 trillion. If you add just those, if you must pay the redemption is a principle. If the people who have given you money come and say, we want our principal, and you have to pay, and they always put it in the books. It's the one figure that is always contested. So the budget is this, and then there's another figure that is slightly up. Then you have a revenue of 3,600. Already it says that for you to provide all the other services, you need about some other 2,000 or 2 trillion. Yeah. Now, because of that, it means that all the money you are borrowing, a lot of it is just going to pay teachers, you know, to deal with different other expenses. By the time you come to do, you know, the beauty about the external borrowing, a lot of the external borrowing, is that it's pegged. Today we can continue fighting to get the SGR documents because we know the money that was borrowed was pegged to SGR.
Yes.
But when you come to the Eurobonds, they are not pegged to anything specific. They are just, you know, they are borrowing to come and, finance the budget. The goal would be, and we have pushed this to Parliament to say, we know so much has been borrowed, at least from the books. Can we align it to specific projects that were done? Because part of the reason why we are so in debt distress, hence my red, is that you cannot trace what projects we have done with the money. And therefore, the projects are not giving us any return on investment, as it were, including the guaranteed loans, because there are monies we have taken as loans and guaranteed Kenya Pipeline, and guaranteed Kengen, and Kenya Airways, and guaranteed all these same state corporations. Not to mention, they're the same state corporations that account for about 80% of the pending bills. They're the ones not paying. Yeah? So we have said we want to see the projects that you are doing with the money that you are borrowing. And for me, therefore, the concern for domestic borrowing is twofold. One, the interest rate is too high. Two, you actually cannot trace it for where it has been spent.
And Ruga, I think before you even proceed then, we know exactly like you've said, we borrowed SGR money to finance SGR, we can see it. Whether we are seeing return on investment is another question.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
But is there express orders or requirement that even when we are borrowing locally, it ought to be pegged to a project?
So there's no express for borrowing or externally or internally. What the law says is that all borrowing is for capital expenditure. Just to change it from development, because I find the development word, I think everything is development, even a teacher going to class is also participating in development. So for capital expenditure. And the reason for that is that you are investing in something that will give you a return. So you're borrowing to put up a mango industry, a mango processing plant. That mango processing plant will spur the economy. You're borrowing to put up a road, you know, that opens up parts of the country, or an SGR that moves goods. Now, our SGR seems to move more goods in than it moves out, which is corroborated by our exports numbers. You know, we have more coming in. You know, our stabilization of the the forex seems to be more to facilitate import than than export. So for me, we have not reached there, and that is why we are. I mean, even part of the Okoa Uchumi campaign that I'm part of, we are saying we want every project tied to its source of money. And this has been, the reason why it never moves is what baffles me. Uhuru Kenyatta, when he was Minister for Finance and Deputy Prime Minister, came up with e-promise. E-promise was to do a very basic thing. It was to tie every project to its source of money.
But why is that so difficult? I must interject, and then maybe we can why is that so difficult to do?
Why?
Because when you go to ask for the funds, essentially, there is a reasoning, and there's a lot of policy documentation, and there's a lot of work and number crunching that goes behind it. When people fly off to wherever it is that they go, there is a reason for which this money is being given. Why would it be so difficult then to peg the project to the source of funds?
Before I answer that question, let me make it more dramatic.
Okay, here we go.
All of you, I'm sure you have borrowed some money.
Yes.
Now, when I borrow money, I always tie that money to a specific project. I want to borrow money to build a house, to buy a car, maybe to plant trees. Individuals always tie their money, particularly borrowed money, to specific projects because they want to see the future returns. Yes. But in government, it does not happen that way for a very simple reason: politics. So occasionally you see our political leaders go to a political rally and say, we are going to build a road here, we are going to build this here. So if you tie money to the projects, as he is putting it, where will that money, where will that room for maneuver come, particularly with 2027 coming? So because of politics, that's why you never tie money you borrow to specific projects. Because as a politician, you must always appease to your constituents, to your voters. That's the reason. There's politics, not because of economics. But I wish that could happen because it will make a very big difference. Remember, at the end of the day, there's one statistic I never see in our budget, I never saw in economic survey unless you saw it, productivity. We want to make this economy more productive. We want to make everybody more productive.
We never measure it.
That's why you want to build roads. That's why you want to use. That's why you want to use more IT, more automation, so the economy can be more productive. If it becomes more productive, it expands and will create jobs for young men and women. So it's all politics. That's why we don't tie specific projects to specific money that is borrowed.
But Prof, even while at that, we are borrowing using stipulated law.
Yeah.
Right? It is the law that then demands that everything you borrow is tied to a specific project. Whilst we can talk about politics, there is the law. So what I'm hearing us say then, it is intentional breaking of the law because we can run away with it because we are playing politics. But that notwithstanding, Prof, as well, while we look at projects have not been tied to, funds have not been tied to projects that you're still borrowing. We can't equally talk about funding the budget and not talk about wastage that we see on a daily basis. Because the wastage and corruption that we see in government today is actually denying the very same government to do the projects that they tell Kenyans on a daily basis, tutatengenezea barabara kutoka Kotulo, Modogashe, hapo kwa hiyo kona. It is because of the wastage that we see that we are unable to do that. So if today, say, we seal wastage and corruption in government, what are we likely to see in the economy?
In fact, we are bringing the issue of wastage too late in this program. It should have been the starting point. Okay. Because if you don't want people to pay, if you don't want to borrow, if you don't want to pay to people, if you want more taxes, you don't want to borrow, you don't want more levies, the best alternative is to reduce your expenditure. And you cannot reduce expenditure in health or in education, because that's very critical. But you can reduce expenditure in corruption. I've always said that one former president stood in public and gave us the amount of money that is wasted in this country.
2 billion.
And nobody has ever publicly denied that. So if we can reduce this wastage, corruption, nepotism, duplication of duties, all these debates about debt, about levies would be reduced. And I've always given a very simple example. I drive a Vitz because that's what I can afford and because of petrol. And I've always wondered, why can't the government drive Vitz? Have you ever seen a Vitz GK or a Vitz County? So why can't we reduce such wastes? The roads in Kenya, in Nairobi, are very good because that's where the government is. So the government would be very comfortable driving a Vitz. And nobody said that a big car is a status, is a symbol of status. There are people who have a lot of power and they drive very small cars. So if we can reduce such waste, there are a lot of duties that are done by the county and done by the government. So such wastes in cars and other expenses would definitely give a lot of savings. And you probably realize that you don't need even to increase the taxes. You don't need to increase the levies. Number two is, why are we having more levies coming up? Yet, with IT, services are becoming cheaper. I used to go and queue to get driving license some years ago. Nowadays, I get from my house. So why should it be expensive? So I agree with you that waste is one area we must target. But the question that comes is, do we have the political will to target corruption, to target nepotism, to target waste? If we had that political will, and I say it again, such that I can make decisions today that will sacrifice my MP, my women rep, my presidency next year, this country will change. But as long as we don't have that political will, we shall be talking about this in 2037.
And that explains why there is no energy to deal with government-owned enterprises. Entities, really, many of them are not enterprises. There's no energy. You remember, it must be the KEPSA team and Abdikadir that wrote the report in 2015 on what needed to be done with this over 200 government. Since then, they have actually increased in number. You know, the other day we were just running, you know, like looking through even the funds, the separate funds from the consolidated fund. We have upwards of almost 80 funds, you know, that don't have the. So that tells you that this becomes then the political space where you reward. And interestingly, in the budget, all we see is a transfer. It's normally one line, transfer to other government agencies. 10 billion, 20 billion, 15 billion, And when you put that money together, you are talking of almost a third of our budget is actually going to those entities. When you corroborate with the numbers, you know, assuming the president did not tell us whether Sunday and Saturdays were included, of the 2 billion, you're talking of about 700 billion. That's almost equivalent to your deficit and the entire budget that is given to the state corporations.
And the budget for development.
And the budget for development. So are you saying everything you borrow, it's actually what you borrow? And you see, so without dealing with corruption and the theft of public resources, because I think we give it very lousy names, it's just theft of public resources, you know. Without dealing with that, it means that you're expanding the budget, but every extra shilling in this budget, every extra collection in this budget will, first of all, go to repaying debt, which we are saying we need to ask questions about, including who is being paid to. But more importantly, you are also then saying the rest of the money will actually get lost. And that's when now you start seeing we have delays in capitation, we have delays in sending medicine and buying drugs, we have delays in critical. I think even I think some point we wanted our armed men to buy their own lunch, to pay for their own food in the barracks, and the like. So you have all those things happening not because you don't have money. I think it's important for us to make it very clear. It's not that we don't have money. Our revenue has actually been growing, even in this constrained environment, average 10%, year on year. Very few Kenyans have had their salary grow with 10% year on year. Our taxation, our contribution is going up year on year at 10%. So it's not that you don't have money. And I think it's in this show I said we don't have a revenue problem. Yeah. Never had. But without dealing with corruption, and without dealing with how you prioritize, and because the budget we are talking right now is an election budget. It's a campaign budget. All the things you see in there are largely targeted at making sure, we are re-elected.
The hope also is that folks are using data and information to inform decisions, and that this budget statement is a decision that didn't start last week. It started on the 30th of August, 2025.
Correct.
In order to have this done.
Yeah.
The things that you speak of, Auditor General's report, is actually coming out from monies that have been spent or not spent in the year before. So why would you then have a budget statement that includes your appropriations as well as your finance bill on mistakes that we can have already seen that have been made?
Because there's no energy to deal with them. It is not, to use Prof's word, the politics, and the politics is not always a bad thing. It's politics of appropriation for private gain, because what else drives corruption, But also a citizenry that also needs, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday and he told me perhaps we don't need electoral reforms, we need citizen reforms. A citizenry that actually does not expect its member of parliament to go and push for oversight, but actually expects the handouts over the weekend. A citizenry that will not ask this politician whose salary we can guess, we can know. We know. If you need to check, you can check and you can find out. Comes with money bags for sports, over the weekend, does not question. So that there is almost an implicit expectation that the goal of going into government is to bring money. So a bad politician is the one who does not bring money back.
Yeah.
A good politician, at least hakuli peke yake, he eats with them. Because I think that is what is really driving the corruption. All these monies for campaign. It's not campaigns to put billboards on or posters. It's not money. It's mobilization money, facilitation money. Attendance money, heckling money, booing money, silence money, whatever you want done, you pay for it. But why is it that we as citizens seem to have accepted that as a way of life? And therefore we do not demand from our, because if I have come and I've given you money, tomorrow you cannot ask me to do my job. But I tell you, but where do you think that money came from?
I paid for it.
I paid for it. I brought you something. So for me, that accountability has to start from even the citizens demanding, that we need a better Kenya. We need a better country. Because unless somebody is asking those questions and enforcing, because law enforcement is really the challenge. We can go around, but unless we enforce the law, unless we demand for accountability. We will be here again next year. We'll come and talk about a 5.5 trillion budget, and all of us then go home and are frustrated. We now start going through our own depression and hoping it will not get worse than this.
Yeah.
But the reality is these things. That's
Prof, many are asking the question, the budget 2026-2027, is it monarchy friendly? Why? Because you look at the levies that have been introduced, say sugarcane, levies that have been introduced on sugarcane when you're transporting it as well. You talk about the new rules on registering your mobile phone when you buy it. You look at the gig economy as well in there. And Monanche are asking, is this Monanche friendly? Or what would inform a budget to be Monanche friendly?
Let me take you back to economic survey. It's always very important to emphasize to Kenyans that always read the two documents to Kenyans.
Yes.
What I found in the economic survey is that 51% of Kenya's GDP or Kenya's economy is service-based. That's where money is made. So if that is where money is made, the government will follow that.
Okay.
That's why you are seeing those taxes about buying mobile phones, transport, things like the gig economy. That's where the money is. So the government is saying, this is where you are making money, let me also get a piece of it in terms of taxes. Now, why is the economy not monarchy friendly? Very simple. People did not go to the gig economy, they did not go to the informal sector because that was their dream.
It's true.
If you talk to young boys and girls in high school, nobody will tell you that my dream is to become an entrepreneur or to be a writer, to be paid to write papers for students in other parts of the world. Nobody wants to do that. People want a formal job where you have a pension, you are assured of health, and so on. But the gig economy, but the economic reality, which we have discussed today, because the environment is not conducive enough for us to expand the formal enterprises. 80% of the economy has remained formal. So most people, 80% are in the formal sector. So if they are there because they have no choice, and then you follow them, then you cannot say that the budget is monarchy friendly. Because they are saying, we have already been squeezed by circumstances to be in the informal sector. Now you are following us. That's why people are very pessimistic. That's why you are finding liquidity in banks, people don't want to borrow. And that's why you are seeing some people now leaving the city and go to the countryside because they are saying the city has become too hot. Let me go and relax in the countryside and see where there are opportunities. But as Kenyans, we are not supposed to give up because this is our country. I believe what Rugo is saying is very simple. We need to participate in the affairs of this country. Don't just vote. Follow up your MP, your MCA, your women rep after you vote them in. Because politicians, if you don't punish politicians, they will do what they want. And you can punish them in two ways, vote them out. And the other way is, when they come for a political rally, they are giving money, don't pick the money. If Kenyans stop picking money from politicians, they stop following politicians just because they are being given money, to make a very big difference. If I'm a politician today, and I go call a political rally and nobody turns up, I'm sure I even return money that I have stolen. But that's a dream. I don't think
And arrest people.
And arrest people.
Yeah.
From all indications, I mean, lastly, the finance bill will probably sail through and will become an act. 1st of July, we're probably going to kick all of this into play. Does it look a little bit more, the forecast is that it looks a little bit more difficult for Kenyans going forward. Is that already established?
Yeah. I think the biggest nightmare of the finance bill is not even so much what it will collect. Because when you look at then, and I'm waiting to hear the CS, but our estimation is that you're not going to collect an extra of more than 120 billion using the finance bill for 2026. It's a very small amount. The biggest nightmare in that finance bill is a compliance burden it's going to introduce to households. If the provisions for KRA to be able to raid and even pre-populate, for instance, your tax upfront. So when you go to file your returns, you find that a figure has already been put for you there. It's you to prove that actually that's not the figure you should be paying. It will create a lot of complication. And the reason why I say that is that it only creates complication for those who are already in the tax bracket. So what does that do? It creates a lot of people the desire to make sure you stay out of the tax bracket. And how do you do it? You don't formalize anything. Because the formalizing is like the beginning of your death in terms of your business and all that. That compliance nightmare, I think, is going to be very, very tough and very, very rough. And to some extent, I think unfair. Two, with the levies and all these things growing, they are regressive. Because as Prof said, they do not discriminate whether you earn the same or you earn more or you earn less. The fees are the same. Whether you earn 1,000 shillings or I earn 1,000,000 shillings, we pay the same amount for driving license renewal. Yeah? So it's regressive in that sense, because then you're being punished if you don't have an income. For me, those are the big concerns. But bottom line, I think the bigger portion of the money is already what the taxes already, the laws already have in place. As you can see, it's already 2.9 trillion. And it's how we spend that money that really, for me, makes a big, big, big difference. Yeah, thanks.
Well, that these statements will be made, the budget will be read, finance bill may go through, become the Finance Act, the appropriations bill then comes through, all of this will happen. But for Kenyans to be aware of what is happening, the underlings of this conversation, extremely important for us. It will be interesting to see what happens come July 1st and how this actually plays out on Kenya's economy. But we want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us to have this conversation. Dr. Exen Iraqi, economist, Abraham Rugo has the last thing.
One last thing. Remember, you have your member of parliament and they have not voted for the budget. The budget is still under discussion on the floor of the House. So you still can petition. You still can ask questions. 2024 showed us that you actually can push even to the last point.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, so people should not feel like, now we are cornered, the life has ended, let them do what they want to do. I think people should still write to their members of parliament, they should still ask the hard questions, because something needs to happen and something needs to give. Thanks.
Expect lots of supplementary budgets. I'm sure that's one way to deal with the budget once led. And number two, levies, taxes. Put music to account, you get more milk. Treat Kenyan taxpayers well, you get more taxes.
Absolutely. Dr. Exen Iraqi, economist. Dr. Abraham Rugo, Executive Director of Budgeti Hub. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's the Situation Room. We'll take another break here now. And also to let you know, as we come back from that break, our reporter Kelvin Nyakundi is on ground to let us know exactly what's going on. It's Budget Day 2026, 2027 that year. And as we get into those details, he'll be on ground to give us an update of what's going on in his neck of the woods. And we'll come back and continue with the conversations on the Situation Room. Simulcast with KTN this morning on our special coverage of the budget. Ndu and Dennis with you this morning. We'll be back after this. Stay with us.
This is the Situation